I never actually thought something like this would happen to me. I've always enjoyed reading real-life creepy stories, and have developed quite the imaginative and paranoid persona because of it, something I always thought would be just a novelty. A few years ago though, when I was 19 years old, I'm female by the way, I was coming home from watching the fireworks display on New Year's Eve. It was around 3 a.m. when I reached my safe, family-friendly, nothing-ever-happens neighborhood. I'm from Sydney, Australia, and I live in a posher and wealthier area. My friends wanted to call a taxi because we didn't want to wake our poor parents at this hour to drive us back home. Because of my stubbornness and insistence though, instead we ended up taking the very long walk home. My friend Aiden was complaining most of the time, and I guess you can't really blame him. Rohan was just silent and compliant. I was very cheerful though. As we reached almost to my street, the three of us split ways. The guys continued on their even longer way home, much longer than mine, and I continued on my trip. As I passed by this little cake shop, I noticed a guy across the street. I only glanced at him very briefly, but something in the way he almost jolted upright to look at me in interest caught my attention. I hurried on a bit because I was usually paranoid about these sorts of things. 99% of the time though, it was just that, me being paranoid. I turned down onto my street, which was much darker than I'd anticipated. This was about 3:15 a.m., mind you. As I passed by the bowling club in the oval, I kept looking behind me just to make sure. It was getting even colder and darker, so I was really starting to feel a creepy ambiance. There was no one behind me, thankfully. No one anywhere as far as I could see, actually. I was about halfway down my street where the road dips down when I noticed something off on the path in front of me. I couldn't tell at first what it was. At the last minute, I stepped off the path onto the road to avoid it. It looked like it might be a dead animal or something. As I took that step out onto the road, I turned ever so slightly to do it and saw that in fact there was someone behind me. They weren't too close by, slightly hidden away. I remember my heart leapt into my throat because I hadn't noticed this person before. For them to have gotten that close in that short a space of time, something about that didn't sit right with me. When I tell people this later, they of course said I should have been quite sus right then. It's 3 a.m. in the morning and you're quietly walking behind someone, not even bothering to keep a safe distance. If you were really innocent, you would take measures to emphasize that, right? I couldn't make out who this was, nor could I tell if they were male or female. They were just far enough away to basically only be a black figure to me. It was a very brief glimpse. I still got scared though, so I whipped out my phone and started to call Aiden. I kept on calling him over and over, but I just couldn't connect for some reason. I tried to call Rohan as well, but he wasn't picking up either. I kept this up at least 5 times, increasingly getting anxious. I didn't dare to look behind me at this point though, to see if the man was still following me. In fact, I'm kinda glad I didn't actually. I think I would have just freaked out and stopped in place if I'd confirmed it. By that time, I'd reached my driveway, and I hurried up to it thinking I was safe. As I was halfway up though, I looked over my shoulder again really quickly and saw the figure right there. On one hand, it may have looked like he was merely passing by my driveway, but on the other, I was much more certain that it looked like he was just about to step onto my driveway as if to walk up in the moment I'd caught him. At that precise moment, the thought occurred to me that it might be my brother Jonathan perhaps. There was no reason anyone else would bother walking up my driveway. And he would sometimes come home around this time. Even if some guy was following me, it never occurred to me that he would really go to the lengths of going up my driveway as well. I thought I was completely safe because I had the advantage of having my house close by when he'd started following me. As I looked closer though, I noticed the build of this figure really did not seem to be Jonathan. I really started to hurry. My beautiful, wonderful, amazing mother thankfully had stayed up to wait for me. I'm so glad because she opened the door for me as soon as I knocked. I hate to imagine what would have happened if I'd had to wait. I went inside, but I left the second door open and the outside light on. I thought perhaps that really was Jonathan just coming home any second now, until my mom said this. "Oh, you can turn those off. Your brother came back 2 hours ago." I really got creeped out then. I closed the door, shut off the light, and went to get a drink of water. Mom went to bed. I went to my room to grab my clothes and went to the bathroom to take a shower. I switched off the living room lights as well. I figured that would be the end of it. It's sort of funny now that I think about it. Before I took a shower, I replied back to a message from Aiden, who was asking if I was home safe yet. I demanded to know why he hadn't picked up his phone, and then told him I was creeped out by a figure following me. I was okay now, though. As I showered, I actually thought a bit about that figure. I wasn't too convinced at first that they had really been following me, but my mind did teeter now into wondering this or that. In any case, though, because I was home, surely I was safe now. Near the end of my shower, though, I heard something at the window. It didn't sound like the usual creaking or bumping of an old house. The way I describe it to other people, it was like the sound of someone resting their hands against the window to steady themselves. It was such an unnatural sound. It caught my attention straight away. I immediately jumped to the possibility that surely there was someone outside. I know that only a really strange sound would make me do what I did next, which was to shut off the water and crouch underneath the window, hiding and waiting. I waited for some time, too scared to move. There was nothing, though. I gingerly crawled out, too scared to stand up properly, and switched off the bathroom lights. By then, it was impossible for me to dry and dress myself. I turned on the heater light, which was much smaller and dimmer. As I did that, I noticed that now at the window there were some very small blue lights. Certainly something that never belonged there before. It was almost like the keypad of a phone lit up. At this point, I switched off the heater light as well and backed into the corner, my towel wrapped firmly around me, and I waited. It seemed like a long time, too scared to unlock the door or move. I knew that would make a lot of noise. As I waited in the pitch darkness, I could see several blue lights moving back and forth outside the window. At one point, it even became very bright, as if someone was trying to shine it through. Now that I think about it, it must have been a phone, and there were quite a few lights as well. That did it. I practically bolted out from my mom. I unlocked the door and ran to my parents' room, trembling like a leaf and gibbering that there was someone outside the bathroom window. I was very clearly upset, so Mom ushered me around trying to find a safe room for me to change. Dad apparently heard the footsteps hurrying back down the driveway. I'm glad he did, because the situation was so surreal to me now, I'm not even sure I would have believed it happened. Maybe I would have believed I imagined it all. This was confirmation, though, that it was not just in my head. I was so shaky I slid into bed and couldn't sleep the whole night until it was morning. Even when it was morning, I was still terrified, especially when I heard Dad leave the house to go into the backyard. So, that's my lesson learned. Never walking home at night again. I'm even a bit worried during the daytime. We never did find out who it was either. People wonder if it was the same person I'd passed earlier, but honestly, I don't think so. My brother doesn't think so either. He says he thinks someone might have been lurking at the oval and come out of a little hole as I walked past that supposed dead animal because of how suddenly they appeared behind me. First off, you need to know that I live in a poor Eastern European country, in a big city with a bad neighborhood. At least, that's what I've been told. I'd never actually encountered any creepy individuals that might want to do me any harm. Just your usual vandals and some mild troublemakers here and there. Never anyone seriously bad, though. I'm still a teenager and live with my parents, but growing up in this environment, I consider myself to be quite street smart, a feature that's helped me often when I get into trouble. It turned out to be very useful today as well. At about 3 p.m., my dad left for ping pong practice. I knew because of that he'd be back around 8 or so. Usually he'd hang out with his friends afterward and have a beer or something. Coincidentally, my older brother and mom had also left to help one of my friends clean up the place after a New Year's party. I should have gone along with them, but today I just happened to be under the weather, and it was decided I should stay inside. In reality, I was just very hungover, but hey, my mom didn't need to know that. That was probably the luckiest I've ever been. You'll find out why in a minute. So all of my family leaves except for me, right? Naturally, I've been home alone before, so that doesn't make me uneasy at all. I do take a little more precautions though whenever I'm home alone. Check to see if the door is closed multiple times, turn off all the lights when not needed, etc. The evening mostly just went like any other. I was sitting there re-watching some episodes of Skins when suddenly I felt the urge to get a snack. Just behind my apartment complex, there's a very well-known supermarket on which I can always rely whenever I'm in deep need of a snack. That's like a 5-minute walk or so. I put on a coat and some flip-flops and took off in all my messy glory. It was freezing balls outside. I could see the bright lights of the supermarket off in the distance, but something was off. In front of those automatic doors, there was like this small, robust figure. As I got closer, I could distinguish it was a man and his face. It was a person I'd in fact seen around before. I remember him countless times roaming around our block of flats, but I'd never really thought anything of him. He was dressed quite poorly and just standing in front of the doors, as if he was guarding them or something. I asked if the supermarket was still open, and he pointed at a paper which was clipped near the schedule. It said closed at 6 p.m. due to the holiday season, and now it was 6:20. I let out a deep sigh and started to turn around to go home, but he told me in a very alarmed voice that there was a close boutique next to the supermarket. I told him I didn't really need anything important though. I would just come back tomorrow. He kept on insisting, saying it was only a 2-minute walk away, all while giving me this extremely strange stare. That was the first red flag, but I tried to find a logical explanation in my mind. Perhaps this man was just very eager to help, maybe so that I'd give him some extra money. That sorta made sense in my mind, but I was still more alert at this point. I walked to the boutique and took whatever I could find the fastest, paid and wished the shop owner a happy new year. I left in quite a hurry. As time passed, I was getting more and more nervous for some reason. I figured it was just my gut telling me something was off. What really made me worried though was the fact that I'd been gone for about 5 minutes. Just as I was passing back by the supermarket, I noticed that guy was now nowhere to be seen. At that point, I started to jog towards my apartment, all the while trying to calm myself and imagining plausible explanations as to why the man was not there. I got to the bottom of the stairs of the front door, and in the distance, I noticed a tall, dark figure entering the elevator. At the same time, almost like it was planned, the automatic lights switched off. I desperately ran towards the interphone and clumsily got my keys out to open the door. As I ran to the elevator, it was still running. I live on the 7th floor. I could see it go up to the 3rd, then the 4th, then the 5th, and stopped. I let out a big sigh of relief, but was still skeptical, so I took the stairs instead. As I was walking up, almost laughing at myself for being silly, I noticed that just above me, the light on the 6th floor was turned on. That was a bit curious, but I just kept on walking. Suddenly, I saw the light on the 7th floor turn on as well, and I stopped. I looked above and hoped whoever it was would go to the 8th floor. A minute passed, which felt like hours at this point, but I saw the light for the 7th floor was still on. I decided to take action and ran all the way up to where my floor was. I saw something that almost made me pass out. That tall figure from the elevator was kneeling at my doorknob, trying what I presumed to be lock-picking my door. In these kinds of situations, I rarely get angry. I just want whatever is going on to stop. From as far away as I could, I shouted out a very meek, "Hey!" The guy in an instant turned around and shot up. I saw him for a split second. He looked terrifying. Black trench coat, a big hat, and leather gloves. He smiled at me and revealed his yellow teeth. You know that stomach-churning feeling when you stumble upon something so scarily out of this world and wrong that you just can't look away, but you want to? It was like that, but amplified by 1,000. I was shitting my pants. I thought he was going to come after me. To my surprise, though, the man took off running instead. Before he reached the stairs, he mumbled a "sorry" and slipped away. I was so in shock that I couldn't follow him or call police in the moment. I couldn't even move for that matter. I easily got to the door of my apartment now and noticed a pin was still stuck in the lock. Yeah, he had definitely been trying to get into my house. Who knows what he wanted to do? My parents wouldn't be back for about 2 more hours. I was not sure if I should tell them. Thinking in retrospect, I think this tall man and the man in front of the supermarket may have conducted a plan. It would have been all too convenient for them to catch me off guard like that. Either way, it's a scary thought. One thing's for certain though, I will be keeping a bat in my room from now on. So I can't entirely say I know what's happening here, as to this day I still have no clue who did and is doing this to me. This all started when I was in 8th grade. The very first time it happened. This was a good 6 or 7 years ago, mind you. I live in a sweet southern suburb outside Austin, Texas with my family. Being as I'm the oldest of the 4 of us, I was always home alone because my siblings had parks and rec, sports, things like that, and I didn't really do any extracurriculars. It was a weeknight and my family were all at my sister's gymnastics tournament. I had been supposed to go as well, as all of the members of the family had to attend all our siblings' stuff, but I was sick. I've always been a fairly cautious creature, one who makes sure the doors are locked when I'm alone. Because of my lifelong love of anything and everything scary, naturally I had watched more than a few episodes of Criminal Minds and the like before heading to the 3rd floor, where my parents' room is, to take a bath in their fancy tub. It was about 8:30. It was in the winter as well, so it had long since gotten dark outside. About 20 minutes into my bath, though, I started to hear footsteps, loud ones like big work boots, walking up the steps. My dad, being a construction worker, did wear some big boots, so I thought it might have been him. I called out, though, and heard nothing in response. The steps kept on going, though, before reaching the top. Then all the sounds stopped and I didn't hear anything else. I turned the water off and listened for a while, but there was still nothing. I turned the water back on and went back to reading my book in the tub. The next night, one of my sisters had their final game. This game was a very late one in a town about 25 miles away, so again my family went together after making me dinner. I almost decided to go since I was feeling a little bit better, but I didn't because my mom didn't want to risk getting people outside the family sick. I really wish I had gone with them though. Like usual, I locked up the side door and ate some ice cream while watching a bunch of scary shows. I then headed up to my parents' room to take another fancy bath and read more of my book. This time it was a bit later though, almost around 10 or so. I was taking a very long bath and had already forgotten about the night before, until that sound happened again. I heard those same footsteps creeping up the stairs. Mind you, our stairs are hardwood, not carpet, so you could hear when someone was stepping on them quite clearly. The house was dead silent too, except the sound of the TV, which I had left turned on in the room outside the bathroom. I automatically turned the water off again and felt my heart almost stop beating. I was so scared. The footsteps this time seemed quite hurried, like the person was skipping up the steps in a rush. Once again, they stopped when they reached the top. I waited for almost 5 minutes, and nothing. I turned the water back on and picked up my old track phone and dialed my mom's number. She picked up and I started talking right away, asking if it was her. She didn't reply, but I could hear someone on the other end breathing. I started to get a bit mad. Why was she messing with me like this and not replying? All of a sudden, though, a deep voice called back through the phone, which made me almost drop it in the tub. It snapped at me. "I am not your mom." Then they hung up. As if instantly, banging started on the bathroom door. I burst into tears. This was not just knocking. They were smashing that door like it was going to fall down. This entire person's weight was being thrown into it. I dialed 911. Right when I hit send, the banging stopped and I hung up. I really didn't know if my family was just playing a trick on me. The last thing I wanted to do was have the cops come. I was already a troubled kid, so I might get in even more trouble. I stayed there in the bathroom, sitting in the corner wrapped in a towel for over 30 minutes before I heard my family's minivan pull up into the driveway. At that moment, I started crying even more. I knew that whoever was just in my house was not a member of my family. My mom called out my name, and I responded by telling them I was upstairs. I was not leaving this room until I knew I was safe. I told her what had happened, and she didn't believe me at first. The door was still locked when they got home, so how could someone have just gotten in? It turned out she had left her phone at home on the counter by accident, so when I told her to get it, she went to right where she'd left it. There it was, sitting right on the counter. No incoming call in the phone's memory either. I showed her my phone though, which clearly still had the outgoing call on it. This didn't add up. For a while, she thought I must have had some sort of mental break that night, or hallucinated everything. To ease my mind though, we added a chain lock to every door in the house. For 5 years, nothing extreme like that ever happened again. Life did get pretty busy though. I got involved in activities that made sure I was never home alone again. I joined sports in every season, volunteered, anything and everything I could do. Every month or so though, I would hear these distinct footsteps on the porch below me. I lived on the second floor in the bedroom on the far left side directly over the front porch, so I could hear everything, even my dog sighing. It would always be someone like pacing back and forth. Then my dog would start barking and immediately the steps would stop. It got so bad one night when I was 15, I woke up myself and the twins. We all met in the hall, fully prepared to go down and attack whoever was on our porch. My brother equipped with his baseball bat. Once we got downstairs though, it stopped. It wasn't until this last summer, just as I'd turned 18 and finished my first year of college, that the scariest moment happened to me. It was a weekend night, and my parents had gotten accustomed to going out of town pretty much twice a month, leaving me, my brother, and my sister home alone. They took my other brother, who was only 9. This night, the twins were going to a party in the neighboring town though, and would not be coming home until the next day. I saw this as the perfect time to camp out downstairs in the living room, make a bunch of food, watch a bunch of movies, and get high. I FaceTimed my boyfriend. Somewhere into the call though, he said something that kinda creeped me out. I really didn't think much of it at first since I was so high, but he called out to me and asked, "You're home alone, right?" I was confused and laughed. Of course I was. Why? He shook it off, saying he thought he'd seen something in the porchway behind me, but he wasn't really sure what it was. I got up right away and walked to the laundry room. I made sure the door was closed, I double-checked all the locks, I passed down at around 1 a.m., TV on and all. All of a sudden though, I woke up to a loud banging around 3. Immediately, I was pierced with fear. It was the same loud body-slamming banging from years ago, a memory I had blocked. It started at the side door directly to my right. I couldn't move my body. I was too scared. I looked over and saw a light flashing inside, like someone was shaking a flashlight into the door. Then the same noise started at the front door, and again at the side door. All 3 doors to my house were lit up, banging so hard the entire house was shaking. Then I heard it on the front porch, like a knife or something sharp being dragged along the door. I was bawling my eyes out. I dialed 911 and started frantically explaining what was going on between my sobs. The person on the phone told me to scream out I was calling the cops, and if needed, he would send someone over. I did, and right away the house went still. Then I could hear someone laughing from all the doors, multiple different voices. This automatically made me think someone must be playing a prank on me. My friends and siblings had been known to try and scare each other. I told the man that everything seemed fine. I thought my siblings might just be playing a prank on me. I laid there and called my brother. When he answered though, I could tell right away it was not him. I could hear the party in the background, which horrified me. I told him what had happened. The twins caught an Uber and immediately came back. We spent the rest of the night texting our friends, trying to figure out who it could have been, but nothing. Almost all our friends were accounted for at that party, nearly 20 miles away, so it couldn't have been any of them. We all slept on the couch with no more occurrences that night. It's been about 5 months since then, and I've since gone back to school. I've only come home once between then and now, and currently I'm home on winter break. Nothing else odd has happened, as I've tried not to stay home alone. Last night though, I was awake for no reason other than scrolling around on Reddit when around 2 a.m. I heard someone pacing back and forth on the porch. I texted my brother, and he confirmed that he heard it too. This happened to me in 2008 in Las Vegas. I was living with my husband and our son, who was about 2 years old at the time. I would frequently take our son to the grocery store early in the evening with me to do some shopping and give my husband some alone time. I never really worried much. The store was literally just outside my neighborhood, plus we lived in a very nice area. I finished up my shopping and put my son in his car seat. By the time I'd finished loading the car, he was passed out. I decided to quickly fill my tank at the gas station on the other side of the lot. While I was pumping gas though, a big truck pulled up on the opposite side of my pump. The man pumped his gas and seemed to take no notice of me. Then he left. Just as I was finishing up though, his truck suddenly pulled up next to my car once again. The man inside, who looked like he loved his meth, said, "Excuse me, miss, but I just felt compelled to tell you how beautiful you are. As a matter of fact, the only reason I came to get gas here, it's because I saw you come here from the grocery store, and I just had to be nearer to you. I've been trying to find the courage to approach you for a while, actually." I was flattered and thanked him for the compliment, but quickly informed him I was off the market. I know, it was worth a shot though. He began to pull off. Suddenly he backed up again though, and said, "If you tell your husband what I said, I'll kill him." Then he drove off. Needless to say, this freaked me out, so immediately I called my husband. He told me not to come directly home, in case the guy followed me. I drove around a bit until I felt I'd lost him, and then I went home. My husband and I went over it over and over again. How could the man possibly kill my husband if he didn't know him or even where we lived? Then, some of the things he said started to ring in my head. How he'd been watching me at the grocery store. I started to think that maybe he hadn't just meant that night. How long? How many days had he been watching me there? When I told him I was married, he said he knew. Is it possible he had followed me home on previous occasions even? We put extra locks on the doors and took extra precautions. We tried to forget about it. He was probably just some crazy guy, right? Well, about a week later, around 8 or 9 p.m., my husband decided to run up to the gas station to get some cigarettes. I was sitting on the computer in our dining room as he left through the garage door. Our son was sleeping in his bedroom on the other side of the house. About a minute after he had left though, suddenly I heard the garage door into the laundry room open and somebody coming inside. Immediately, I assumed my husband must be grabbing something he'd forgotten. I called out to him and didn't get a response, so I called his name again. I received no answer, but I could hear someone moving around in the laundry room. I started to get worried. All the guns in the house were in our room. I would have to walk right past the laundry room to get to them. Suddenly, I heard my 2 pit bulls in my room start growling. Both dogs started barking viciously and ran toward the laundry room door, at which point I heard the laundry room door to the garage open and slam shut very quickly. At that point, I grabbed my phone. I ran into my son's room and called my husband to ask if he had just returned home for something. To my horror, he was still at the gas station. I told him someone was in the house, but I thought the dogs had scared them out. He instructed me to stay in our son's bedroom with the door closed. He was on his way home. so I sat there in the dark next to my sleeping son in sheer terror. 2 minutes later, I heard the dogs barking again and someone barging into the house through the garage door. After what felt like forever, my husband came into our son's bedroom. He checked the whole house and all around our property, but couldn't find anybody. We came to the conclusion that the stalker from the gas station must have finally taken his opportunity to catch me alone. Based on what that creepy tweaker had said to me, who else could it have been? What really freaked me out though is not knowing how long he had been watching me before that. How long had he been watching me before he approached me at the gas station and before he barged into our home? It really opened my eyes that someone could stalk you without you ever knowing about it until it's too late to do anything. I firmly believe my 2 pit bulls saved my life, my son's life, and possibly my husband's too that night. That had my husband not let the dogs into the house before he left, I wouldn't be here right now, nor would my son. To this day, anytime I have to be home alone, or my new husband and I are sleeping, I have to have my pit bull beside me to watch over me,